Elon Musk had just wrapped up a long day at the San Francisco Tech Conference, a blur of handshakes, endless questions about Mars, and discussions that could never quite capture the excitement he felt about the future. Exhausted, he slipped out of the conference center and headed to a quiet corner of the city to clear his mind. It had been a long day, and all he wanted was a moment of peace, something rare in his hectic world. As he walked down the street, his security detail trailing behind, he spotted a small, nearly empty cafe across the road. It looked like the perfect place to grab a coffee and gather his thoughts. The scent of freshly brewed coffee and pastries reached him as he stepped inside. He ordered a simple black coffee and found a quiet corner, away from the windows. It was exactly what he needed, solitude even for just a few minutes. From his corner, Elon could see the entire cafe. The quiet hum of conversation and clinking of cups seemed to fade as his attention was drawn to an elderly woman in a faded blue and white uniform, slowly wiping down tables. She moved carefully, her hunched shoulders betraying the years of hard work. Her silver hair was tied back in a neat bun, and despite her physical struggles, there was a quiet determination in her every move. There was something familiar about her, but it took Elon a moment to place it. It was in the way she moved, the subtle twist of her wrist as she scrubbed a stubborn spot on the table. That slight twist was something he remembered, something from his childhood. He leaned forward, peering at her, his heart racing. Could it be? When the woman turned slightly, he caught a glimpse of her profile. His coffee cup froze halfway to his mouth. The same high cheekbones, the same gentle curve of her nose. A flood of memories came rushing back. Bedtime stories, scraped knees, and someone who always listened when no one else would. The memories were so vivid, so sudden. His throat tightened as he whispered her name, Marabel. The elderly woman didn't hear him, continuing her work. Elon stood up, his heart pounding. Marabel Vega? He asked, louder this time, taking a few tentative steps toward her. The woman turned slowly, her tired eyes meeting his. She seemed confused at first, then the recognition flickered in her expression. Yes, do I know you, sir? She asked, her voice weary but still familiar. Elon took another step closer, his voice soft. It's me, Elon Musk. He paused for a moment, searching her face. From Pretoria. Her eyes widened in disbelief. The rag she had been holding slipped from her hands and fell to the floor. Ellie? She whispered, using the nickname she had always called him when he was a child. She reached out, her trembling hand stopping just short of touching his face. My little Ellie, is it really you? Elon nodded, suddenly finding it hard to speak. The woman who had once held him close and comforted him was now standing before him, a frail shadow of the person he remembered. You grew up so tall, she said softly, her accent still thick despite the years. I see you on the television sometimes, space rockets and electric cars. She smiled proudly. Just like you always said you would. Elon shook his head in disbelief. Marabel, what are you doing here? You must be 85 now. He glanced around the nearly empty cafe, a pit forming in his stomach. Why are you working here? The question was more blunt than he intended, but it came out before he could stop himself. Marabel straightened her uniform, her pride showing in the way she lifted her chin. Life happens, Nino, she said softly. I work because I must. The bills don't pay themselves. A voice called from behind the counter, snapping their moment. Morel, tables 4 and 6 need clearing. Marabel nodded, turning toward the counter. One moment, Mr. Davis, she called back, her voice suddenly sounding tired. Elon took a deep breath, trying to process what he had just heard. Can we talk after your shift? He asked, his voice gentle. Marabel hesitated. I finish at 8, she said, her gaze flicking to the large clock on the wall. Then I catch the bus to my night job. Night job? Elon couldn't hide the shock in his voice. You work 2 jobs? Marabel nodded matter-of-factly. Night cleaning at the office buildings on Market Street, she explained. It pays better than the daytime work. Elon ran a hand through his hair, struggling to process everything. The woman who had bandaged his scrapes and stayed up with him during thunderstorms was now spending her nights scrubbing office floors. His thoughts were a whirlwind, and he could barely keep up. Marabel, I want to... Before he could finish, the manager's voice interrupted again, cutting their conversation short. "I have to go," Marabel said, giving Elon's arm a quick squeeze. "You look good, Nino. Your mother would be proud." Before Elon could say anything else, she shuffled away, picking up dirty dishes as she went. He watched her work, noticing how she winced slightly when lifting a heavy tray. His heart ached. His security guard approached. "Sir, your car is waiting," the guard said, his voice calm but questioning. Elon nodded, still staring at Marabel. She was already busy with another table, her back turned to him. His mind raced as he reached for his wallet and left a $100 bill under his coffee cup, but it felt woefully inadequate. "We need to change plans," he said firmly to his guard. "I want to know everything about this cafe. Who owns it, the shift schedules, everything. And I need to know where she lives." The guard nodded, already making notes on his phone. Elon took one last look at Marabel, the woman who had been the center of his childhood, now invisible to everyone except as someone who cleaned up after them. His heart felt heavy as he walked out of the cafe and into the bustling streets of San Francisco. The contrast was staggering. His car, sleek and expensive, contrasted sharply with Marabel's reality. His phone buzzed with messages from people vying for his time, his money, and his ideas. But behind him, Marabel was still scrubbing floors. "This isn't right," he muttered to himself as he slid into the backseat of his car. His driver pulled away, and Elon's mind spun with thoughts of how to make it right. As Elon sat in the back of the sleek black car, his thoughts continued to swirl. The world outside, with its rushing traffic and endless possibilities, seemed distant and disconnected from the reality he had just encountered. He stared out the window, barely noticing the familiar San Francisco skyline. His mind kept drifting back to Marabel, the woman who had cared for him when he was young, the one who had shaped his earliest dreams of space travel and innovation. How could she, the person who had believed in him before anyone else, be stuck working two grueling jobs just to survive? He had never really considered the lives of the people who helped raise him. As a child, he had taken for granted the stability that Marabel had provided. She was more than just a nanny. She was a source of comfort during the chaos of his family's troubled years. She had taught him how to think differently, how to embrace the future instead of fearing it. Yet now here she was, an elderly woman, working in a cafe at 85, cleaning floors at night, and struggling to make ends meet. The contrast between their lives hit Elon hard. He had spent his life building companies, revolutionizing industries, and making billions, while Marabel, who had nurtured his spirit and encouraged his intellectual curiosity, was still toiling away, barely making enough to cover the bills. How had this happened? How could someone who had shaped his future be forgotten by the very system he had become a part of? Elon's thoughts were interrupted as the car pulled up to his hotel. The engine shut off and his driver glanced at him through the rearview mirror. "We're here, sir." Elon nodded, still deep in thought. He stepped out of the car and walked into the hotel lobby, but the familiar surroundings felt hollow. The lavish furnishings, the polished floors, the luxury that surrounded him, it all seemed meaningless now. His mind was on Marabel, on her wrinkled hands and the exhaustion he had seen in her eyes. How had she ended up this way? He found himself pacing the length of his hotel suite, looking out over the city lights. The view was stunning. San Francisco sprawled out beneath him, the shimmering lights reflecting the technological empire he had built. And yet, there was something deeply unsettling about it. It felt empty, a world of success built on the backs of people like Marabel. The very people who helped him get to where he was, who sacrificed so much, were now forgotten. Marabel's voice echoed in his mind. "I work because I must." The words weighed heavily on him, pulling at his sense of guilt and responsibility. Elon's reflection was cut short as his phone buzzed with notifications. Business messages, emails about upcoming product launches, updates on his ventures, requests for meetings. He glanced at the screen, his thoughts still lingering on Marabel. He couldn't shake the image of her scrubbing tables, her hands trembling from arthritis. It was wrong. All of it was wrong. She had helped raise him, and now she was invisible. It wasn't just a moral issue, it was a human issue. "I can't just let this slide," Elon muttered to himself. "I can't just forget about her." He quickly grabbed his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. the number for his private investigator. The call went through and the voice on the other end was familiar but distant. "Mr. Musk," the investigator said, "how can I assist you?" "I need you to find out everything about Marabel Vega," Elon said, his voice firm. "Where she works, where she lives, her entire background. I want to know everything." There was a pause before the investigator replied. "Understood, sir. I'll start immediately." Elon hung up and sank onto the edge of the bed. His mind was racing. What was he going to do? What could he do? Marabel had made it clear that she wasn't interested in charity, in handouts from him. She had her pride, and Elon respected that. But surely there had to be something he could do. Something more than just throw money at the situation. His thoughts turned to his own childhood. He remembered the way Marabel had taken care of him during his parents' tumultuous divorce. She had been the steady presence in his life when everything else was falling apart. She had taught him more than just academics. She had taught him to believe in himself, to pursue his dreams even when the world didn't seem to understand him. Without her, he wouldn't have had the courage to go after his wildest ideas. Without her belief in him, he might have never become the man he was today. Elon got up and walked over to the window, looking out over the vast city below. The busy streets seemed like a different world, one that he could hardly relate to anymore. His mind wandered to the future. How could he change things for Marabel? How could he help her without making her feel like a charity case? His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a soft knock at the door. Elon turned, surprised. "Come in." His assistant entered, holding a folder. "Sir, I have the preliminary information you requested." Elon took the folder and glanced through it quickly. It wasn't much, just the basic facts. Marabel Vega, age 85, a former nanny who had worked for wealthy families, now employed as a cafe worker and part-time office cleaner. It seemed so insufficient. He closed the folder with a sigh. "We need more than this," he said, more to himself than to his assistant. The assistant nodded. "I'll follow up with more details, sir." As the assistant left, Elon leaned back in his chair, deep in thought. The more he learned about Marabel's situation, the more he felt a sense of urgency. There was no reason for her to be living this way, not after all she had done for him. And yet she was doing it all alone, with no one to help her. It was a harsh reminder of the inequalities in the world and how the people who shaped the future were often the ones left behind. A new determination settled in Elon's chest. He was going to fix this, one way or another. He wasn't sure how yet, but he would make sure that Marabel never had to scrub another table again. Elon Musk spent the following days obsessively thinking about Marabel, about her life, about how things had gone so terribly wrong for someone who had given him so much. Each night he sat alone in his hotel room, staring at the city lights below, trying to process the injustice of it all. How could the woman who had shaped so much of his world end up in such a fragile, precarious position? And why had no one done anything about it? He had never truly taken the time to understand what had happened after Marabel left South Africa. To him, her departure had always seemed sudden, a mystery his young mind had never quite grasped. His mother had always brushed it off as complicated adult business, a phrase that only confused him further. But now, with his childhood nanny working as a waitress at 85, he couldn't just ignore the unanswered questions. Something didn't add up. Determined to get to the bottom of it, Elon called his private investigator again, this time with a different kind of urgency in his voice. "I need you to dig deeper into Marabel's past," he said, his tone firm but edged with frustration. "Find out everything. Why she left South Africa, where she went after that, who she worked for, and who helped her get to the US. I need to know everything." The investigator's voice was calm as he replied, "Understood, Mr. Musk. I'll start immediately." That night, while waiting for answers, Elon turned to his memories, reflecting on the times he had spent with Marabel when he was a child. He saw her clearly now, not just as a figure of stability in his childhood, but as the woman who had taught him to dream, who had given him the foundation on which he had built his success. It was more than just the bedtime stories and bandaged knees. She had been the one who had shown him that the stars weren't just points of light in the sky. They were destinations, places to explore. He remembered the night he had asked her to teach him how to build rockets. He was just a boy, barely old enough to understand what he was asking, but Marabel had listened patiently, guiding him through his first designs for model rockets. It was in those moments that the idea of space travel had been planted in his mind. She had made him believe that nothing was impossible. And now he was one of the richest men in the world, the founder of companies that were changing the world. Yet she was still living in obscurity, toiling away in jobs that no one else would take. The guilt he felt was unbearable. As the days passed, Elon's investigator gathered more information about Marabel, and the pieces slowly began to fall into place. The investigator discovered that Marabel had arrived in the United States from South Africa over 30 years ago, after a sudden departure from the Musk household. It seemed that despite her pivotal role in his life, Elon's mother had kept the details of Marabel's exit from him all these years. The investigator finally sent a message with the results. "I found something interesting, Mr. Musk," the message began. "Marabel worked for several wealthy families after leaving South Africa. The records show she had worked for your family from 1979 to 1985. After that, she suddenly disappears from your family's records. A few weeks later, she applies for an emergency visa to the US. Elon frowned as he read the message. What kind of emergency? He wondered aloud. The investigator's reply came almost immediately. There's a note in the visa application from the US Embassy, but it doesn't specify the exact nature of the emergency. The paperwork simply states family emergency. The curious part is that her sister, who was already living in California, was healthy at the time. There was no death or accident, so it seems she may have fabricated the reason for the visa." Elon sat back, his mind racing. What had happened? What was the family emergency? Why had Marabel been forced to leave? And why had she been so secretive about it all these years? His thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. Elon stood up, still deep in thought, and opened it to find his assistant standing with another folder in hand. "Sir, I have more information on Marabel's employment history," the assistant said, offering the folder. "I thought you'd like to see this." Elon took the folder and opened it, skimming the contents quickly. It listed several families Marabel had worked for in the US after leaving South Africa, but what struck him was the pattern. In each case, Marabel's employment had ended abruptly after a short period. There were no official reasons given for her departure from any of the families. "That's strange," Elon muttered. "She worked for these families, but they fired her without any explanation?" The assistant nodded. "Yes, sir. All of them were wealthy families. She worked as a nanny for their children, but in every case, the contracts ended after 2 years or less. It doesn't appear that she ever quit on her own." Elon ran a hand through his hair. "This doesn't make sense. Why would she leave every job? And why was she let go so suddenly?" There was a silence in the room as Elon thought back to the time when he was a child. The memories of his father's anger, his parents' divorce, and the tension in the house were all too clear. Could it be that Marabel had been forced to leave because she had stood up to his father? He had never understood the complexities of his family's struggles as a child, but now the pieces were beginning to fit together in a disturbing way. "Find out more about her departure from South Africa," Elon said, his voice hardening. "I want to know exactly what happened." Later that night, the investigator sent another message with a new discovery. "Mr. Musk, I found something significant. It seems that Marabel's employment ended in South Africa under unusual circumstances. There's a letter from your father's office dated 1985 regarding her departure. It appears she was asked to leave, although there's no official termination. The letter suggests there were consequences if she remained." Elon's heart sank as he read the words. Consequences? What did that mean? He wondered aloud. The investigator replied quickly. "It's unclear, but the letter from your father's office says that Marabel's presence would be detrimental to the Musk family's reputation. It strongly suggests she was forced to leave the country." Elon felt a chill run down his spine. His father had always been harsh, but this was something else. Why had Marabel been treated this way? Why had his father acted so ruthlessly? As the investigation into Marabel's past continued, Elon began to feel the weight of the truth pressing down on him. His father's actions had cast a long shadow on his life, one that had influenced his relationships and his view of the world. But now, as he pieced together the story, he realized that the true victim had been Marabel. She had been the one who had protected him, who had stood up to his father, and who had been forced to leave because of it. For the first time, Elon truly understood how deep the wounds ran in his family and how much Marabel had sacrificed to keep him safe, as his entire childhood had been built on a lie that he had only now begun to uncover. His mother's silence had kept him in the dark, and now he was left to piece together the fragments of a past that had been carefully hidden from him. "Why didn't you tell me about my real father, Mom?" Elon asked, the question hanging heavy in the air. "Why did you let me believe that Errol was my father when he wasn't? Why did you keep that secret too?" His mother hesitated, and when she spoke again, her voice was full of pain. "I didn't want you to have to carry that burden, Ellie. You were so young. I didn't think it was fair to tell you that the man you called your father wasn't your real father. It wasn't something I wanted you to think about. I thought it was better for you to think of Errol as your father." Elon's heart felt like it had been ripped open. The truth about his parentage, the truth about his family's dysfunction, was more complicated than he could have ever imagined. His whole life had been built on a series of half-truths and omissions, and now the weight of those lies was coming crashing down on him. "I'm sorry," his mother whispered. "I should have told you, but the truth was too painful. I didn't want you to lose faith in your family, in us." Elon stood up, his mind racing. "I need to go, Mom," he said, his voice strained. "I need time to think about all of this." Before his mother could respond, he hung up the phone. The truth was out, and it hurt more than he could have imagined. The woman who had been his emotional anchor throughout his childhood, Marabel, had been forced to leave his life, and it had been orchestrated by his father, one of the men who had shaped his world, for better or worse. Elon walked over to the window, staring out at the city below. He had spent so many years chasing success, building companies, changing industries, and amassing wealth. But now, as he stood on the precipice of the future, he realized that the real work had just begun. He couldn't change the past, but he could do something about the present. And he knew that Marabel, the woman who had believed in him when no one else did, deserved better. It was time for him to make things right. The next few days were a blur of emotions for Elon. The revelations about his past had left him reeling, struggling to come to terms with the web of secrets that had surrounded him for so many years. His relationship with his parents, the truth about his father, and the harsh treatment of Marabel, everything felt distorted, like a jigsaw puzzle where too many pieces had been hidden away. But amidst the whirlwind of thoughts, one thing remained crystal clear. Marabel deserved more. She had given so much to him, and now it was his turn to return the favor. He thought about how he could help her without offending her pride. Marabel had always been fiercely independent, a woman who believed in standing on her own 2 feet, no matter the cost. She had sacrificed so much in her life, but she had never asked for anything in return. Elon knew that throwing money at her situation, no matter how well-intentioned, would not be the solution. Marabel would never accept charity, not from him or anyone else. But there had to be another way. There had to be a way to honor her dignity while still offering her the security and respect she deserved. Elon spent hours thinking, formulating plans and ideas, but nothing felt right. Then one evening, as he sat in his hotel suite, the answer came to him like a bolt of lightning. He could offer her something meaningful, something that would allow her to contribute, to still feel valued and respected, but without stripping her of her autonomy. He could create an opportunity for her to do what she had always done best, guide and nurture others. He quickly picked up the phone and dialed his assistant. "I need you to put together a proposal," Elon said, his voice resolute. "I'm going to offer Marabel a job, a real one, not just a position, but a way for her to use her experience and wisdom. I want to create an educational initiative, a program that helps children of my employees. But I need someone who understands how to nurture young minds, someone who knows how to teach, to encourage creativity and problem solving." The assistant paused, processing the idea. "You want Marabel to be a consultant on this project, sir?" "Exactly," Elon replied. "But I need to offer her more than just a typical job. This has to be something that speaks to her heart, something she can take pride in. It's not just about paying her for her time. It's about showing her how much I value what she taught me. I want her to feel like she's contributing something real." Elon hung up the phone and leaned back in his chair, a sense of determination settling over him. He knew that this wasn't going to be easy. Marabel would be resistant to the idea. She had always been fiercely proud, and accepting any form of help would likely feel like a blow to her self-worth. But he had to try. He had to give her the opportunity to help others, just as she had helped him when he was a child. Later that week, Elon reached out to Marabel to invite her to lunch. He had already planned out the details, an unassuming diner a few blocks away from her cafe, far enough to feel like a private conversation, but close enough to her work that she wouldn't feel like it was too much of an inconvenience. When Marabel walked into the diner, her usual grace was still intact, but Elon noticed the exhaustion in her step, the subtle ache that had crept into her posture over the years. She was tired, worn down by years of hard work, but there was still a spark in her eyes. That spark, the one that had guided him through his childhood, was still there. She greeted him with a small smile as she took a seat across from him. "2 days in a row," she remarked lightly. "Is something wrong, Ellie?" Elon smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Nothing's wrong. I just wanted to talk to you about something important, something I've been thinking about for a while." He noticed her glance at the menu, her eyes scanning the prices carefully before she made her decision. "I'll just have the soup," she said, her voice firm, as if the decision was final. "Are you sure?" Elon asked, genuinely concerned. "It's my treat. You can order whatever you want." Marabel looked up at him, her expression soft but resolute. "Soup is fine. I've had enough fancy meals in my time. There's no need to waste money on me." Elon was about to press the issue again, but decided against it. Instead, he placed his own order, soup as well, and waited until the waitress left the table before getting to the point. "I've been thinking a lot about how you've been living, Marabel," he began carefully. "And I know that you've never wanted anyone's charity, but I believe you've got something special, something that could help a lot of people. When I was a child, you taught me how to think, how to solve problems, how to embrace the future. You gave me a foundation that shaped everything I've done, and I want to give you an opportunity to share that wisdom with others." Marabel raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued but also cautious. "What are you getting at, Ellie?" "I want to create a program for the children of my employees, a program that provides real educational value, not just babysitting, but something that nurtures creativity, problem solving, and critical thinking. I need someone who can help develop the curriculum, someone who understands how to foster young minds," Elon said, his voice growing more confident as he spoke. "And I want you to be that person. I want you to be a consultant on this project. I want you to help me shape it into something that can truly make a difference." There was a long pause as Marabel processed his words. Her eyes flickered with uncertainty, but there was a spark of something else in them too, something that Elon couldn't quite place. "You're offering me a job?" she asked finally, her voice tinged with surprise. "After all these years, you want me to help you with teaching children?" "Yes," Elon said, nodding firmly. "Not just teaching them, but helping me design a program that teaches them how to think outside the box, how to see challenges as opportunities. You've done that for me my entire life. I want you to do the same for others." Marabel leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. "I don't have a teaching degree, Ellie," she said slowly. "I'm not sure I'm the right person for this job." "You don't need a degree," Elon replied, his voice sincere. "You have something far more valuable: experience. You know how to nurture young minds, how to encourage curiosity and creativity. That's what I need. I believe in you, Marabel." Marabel looked down at her hands, her fingers tapping lightly on the edge of the table. She was silent for a long time, weighing his words carefully. Elon could see the hesitation in her eyes, the pride that was keeping her from simply accepting. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft but resolute. "This feels like charity, Ellie. It feels like you're offering me a job out of guilt." Elon shook his head. "It's not charity, it's a partnership. You're not just helping me. You're helping the children, helping them grow and learn in a way that could change their lives. It's not about me giving you something. It's about creating something meaningful together." Marabel's expression softened slightly, but there was still doubt in her eyes. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "But I need time. It's not an easy decision for me." Elon nodded, understanding her hesitation. He knew it wouldn't be an easy decision for her, but for the first time in a long time, he felt hopeful. He had planted a seed, and maybe, just maybe, Marabel would see the opportunity for what it was, a chance to contribute in a way that respected her independence, her wisdom, and her dignity. As they finished their soup and exchanged lighter conversation, Elon couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much bigger. Helping Marabel was more than just a simple gesture. It was about honoring the lessons she had taught him, lessons that had shaped the person he had become. And in that moment, he realized that if he could help her see the value of her own contributions, he could help others do the same. Elon spent the next few days thinking about the conversation with Marabel. Her hesitation to accept his offer was understandable. He had seen it in her eyes. Pride, independence, a reluctance to accept help from anyone, especially him. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but Elon was determined to find a way to show her that her wisdom and experience were invaluable. Still, as much as he wanted to focus on Marabel, his mind kept returning to a different revelation, the one that had shaken him to his core. The discovery about his true father, Joshua Haldeman, had left Elon reeling. Everything he had known about his family, his identity, had been turned upside down in an instant. His whole life, he had believed that Elon Musk was his father, the man who had raised him, the man who had been a constant presence in his life. But now the truth had emerged, and it was impossible to ignore. Elon had always known that his relationship with Errol was complicated. There was an emotional distance between them, something unspoken, something that had always bothered him. He had never been able to connect with his father the way he saw other children connect with theirs. Errol had always been distant, harsh at times, and Elon had spent much of his life trying to prove himself worthy of his approval. But the truth now was undeniable. Errol wasn't his biological father. His real father was someone entirely different. Joshua Haldeman, a man who had been brilliant, creative, and adventurous, someone whose DNA ran through Elon's veins. The realization sent a wave of confusion and anger through him. Why hadn't his mother told him? Why had she let him believe that Errol was his real father for all these years? Elon knew he needed answers, but he wasn't sure where to find them. He had tried to piece together the puzzle through old family records and conversations with his private investigator, but there were still so many questions left unanswered. What had happened between his mother and Joshua? Why had he never known the truth? It wasn't until the following evening, while sitting in his hotel room, that Elon made a decision. He had to confront his mother. He had to ask her about everything: the past, the decisions she had made, and the secrets she had kept from him. It was the only way he could move forward, the only way he could understand who he truly was, and why his relationship with his parents had always felt so strained. He dialed his mother's number, his fingers trembling slightly as he pressed the call button. When she answered, her voice was warm, but there was an edge of hesitation to it, as though she sensed the conversation wouldn't be easy. "Ellie, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice soft. "Mom, we need to talk," Elon replied, his voice steady but firm. "About my real father, about everything." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and Elon could almost hear his mother taking a deep breath. Finally, she spoke, her voice quieter now. "I knew you'd want to know eventually." Elon's heart raced. "Why didn't you tell me sooner? Why did you let me believe that Errol was my father? All these years I've been living a lie." His mother sighed, a deep, heavy sound that seemed to come from a place of guilt. "I never wanted to hurt you, Ellie. You were just a child, and I thought it would be better if you didn't know the truth. I didn't want to complicate your life. I didn't want you to feel different, to feel that you weren't part of this family. I thought that keeping the secret would protect you." Elon clenched his jaw, trying to control his frustration. Protect me? How could hiding the truth protect me? I've spent my whole life feeling like something was missing, like I didn't belong. Now I know why, and it's not just about the truth of who my biological father is. It's about everything you kept from me. Why didn't you tell me about Marabel? Why didn't you tell me what happened with her? Why was she forced to leave South Africa? His mother's voice faltered. "It wasn't something I could explain to you at the time, Ellie. It was complicated. Your father was a difficult man, and Marabel, she was your protector, but that wasn't enough to shield you from the reality of your father's control. I didn't want you to be burdened by it. I thought it would be easier if you just didn't know. Elon felt a pang of sadness, but it was quickly replaced by something else: anger, frustration, and a deep sense of betrayal. You thought it would be easier for me to live in the dark. All these years I've been trying to understand why things were so hard, why I never felt good enough for Errol. But now I know. He never saw me as his son. And you kept that from me. His mother was silent for a long moment. I made mistakes, Ellie. I didn't handle it the right way. I see that now. Elon shook his head, though she couldn't see him. I don't know if I can forgive you for this, Mom. The truth would have been hard, but it would have been better than the lies. I don't know who I am anymore. All these years, I've been trying to live up to someone who wasn't even my father. And now I'm supposed to just accept that everything I knew about my life was wrong? I didn't want you to carry that weight, his mother said quietly. I thought that if you had a father to look up to, someone who could be there for you, you wouldn't need to know the truth. I thought you'd be better off not knowing. Elon's chest tightened as the weight of her words sank in. Maybe you were wrong, he said softly. Maybe I needed to know the truth all along. Maybe that's why I felt so lost for so long. The silence between them stretched, thick with unspoken emotions. Elon realized that his entire life had been built on a foundation of half-truths. His mother had tried to protect him, but in doing so, she had left him to navigate a world where he didn't fully understand who he was or where he came from. For the first time in years, Elon understood the source of the anger and confusion that had followed him throughout his life. It wasn't just about his success or his failures. It was about the secrets that had shaped him, the lies that had been told, and the trust that had been broken. I need time to think, Mom, Elon said, his voice cold but tinged with sadness. I need to figure out what this means. And I need to know more about my real father, about Joshua Haldeman. I need to understand why this all happened. I understand, his mother replied quietly. Take all the time you need, Ellie. But know this, I never wanted to hurt you. I only wanted to protect you. Elon ended the call, his mind racing. The truth about his father had shattered everything he thought he knew about his identity. But the more he thought about it, the clearer it became. His path forward wasn't about understanding his past. It was about deciding who he wanted to be in the future. As he sat there in the quiet of his hotel room, Elon realized that the truth wasn't just a burden to carry. It was a chance to rebuild. He had already changed the world with his ideas, with his vision of the future. Now it was time to change his own world, to redefine who he was and what he stood for. The days following his conversation with his mother felt like a blur. Elon was left with more questions than answers. The weight of the truth about his biological father, Joshua Haldeman, lingered heavily in his mind. The idea that Elon Musk, the man who had raised him, had never been his real father was something that Elon could hardly process. But it was only a part of the puzzle. Marabel's departure, the secrets his mother had kept, the way his father had tried to control his life, all of it combined to create a picture of a family built on a foundation of secrecy, power, and manipulation. As he walked through the busy streets of San Francisco, his mind continued to race. He had always been driven by a need to change the world, to innovate, and to push the boundaries of what was possible. But now more than ever, he felt a deep need to change something in his own life. He couldn't continue living with these unspoken truths, these half-formed understandings of who he was and where he came from. He couldn't keep running from the past. Elon knew what he had to do. He had to confront his father's legacy, confront the truth about his childhood, and find a way to make peace with his past. But he also had to focus on the present, the people who mattered now, especially Marabel. He couldn't let her slip through his fingers, not after everything she had done for him, not after the sacrifices she had made. If there was one thing he had learned through all of this, it was that the people who had shaped him, who had believed in him when no one else did, deserved to be treated with respect and dignity. Elon had made a decision. He would help Marabel, but not with charity. He would give her something that would honor her experience, her wisdom, and her pride. He would make sure that she could live the life she deserved, a life where she didn't have to scrape by working 2 jobs just to survive. It wasn't just about offering her a job. It was about giving her the chance to shape the future, just as she had shaped his. He had already put in motion the plans for the educational initiative that he wanted her to be a part of. But he was going further than that. Elon was going to create a space for people like Marabel, those who had given so much of their lives to others, who had poured their hearts and minds into the next generation, only to find themselves overlooked, struggling in their later years. He had always known that he wanted to give back, but it wasn't until now that he understood what that truly meant. It wasn't about building more rockets, creating new technologies, or making more money. It was about creating a legacy that could last, a legacy that would not just be about products or achievements, but about people. Elon had already started the groundwork for what he was calling the Guardian Angels Project. It would be a living and learning community for retired caregivers, nannies, home health aides, and others who had spent their lives helping others. It would offer them a place to live, a community where they could share their knowledge and experience, and a way to continue giving back in a meaningful way. It wasn't just about providing for them financially. It was about creating a space where their wisdom could continue to impact the world. He had already secured a property in Menlo Park, a former corporate campus that was being transformed into a space for the project. The community would consist of private apartments, shared spaces for socializing, and a central garden where the residents could grow their own food. But what set the project apart was the underlying philosophy. These residents wouldn't just be living in a retirement home. They would be teaching, mentoring, and sharing their skills with the younger generation. Elon wasn't just going to change the way the world thought about the elderly. He was going to change the way society treated those who had given their lives to caring for others. It was a vision that had been inspired by Marabel, the woman who had taught him the true value of patience, creativity, and resilience. But he knew that in order to make the project work, he needed Marabel. She had to be a part of it. He had already asked her to help with the educational initiative, but now he was asking for more. He wanted her to be the guiding force behind the Guardian Angels project. It was time to show her that her experience, her wisdom, and her heart were what the world needed. Elon called her the night before the Guardian Angels project's grand unveiling, his voice filled with anticipation. "Marabel, I need to talk to you about something," he said. She was quiet for a moment, then replied, "What's on your mind, Ellie?" He took a deep breath. "I've been thinking a lot about our conversation, about what you've taught me, and about what I want to do next. I want you to be part of something bigger than us. I want you to be the director of the Guardian Angels project." There was a long pause, and Elon could almost hear the wheels turning in her head. "You want me to run the project?" Marabel asked, her voice filled with disbelief. "Yes," Elon replied. "I want you to guide it. I want you to shape it. You've been a mentor to me my entire life, and now it's time for you to do the same for others. This isn't charity, Marabel. This is about honoring your life's work and giving you the chance to continue making a difference." There was a silence on the other end of the line. Elon could hear her breathing, and for a moment he wondered if she was going to refuse. But then finally she spoke. "I don't know, Ellie," she said quietly. "I've never done anything like this before. I've always just worked, always just done what needed to be done." "I know," Elon said, "but you've done more than just work. You've shaped lives. You've shaped mine. And I want you to know that what you've done matters. It matters to me, and it matters to the world. The Guardian Angels Project is your opportunity to pass on that legacy, to help others, just like you helped me." Marabel's voice softened, and for the first time, Elon could hear a hint of emotion in her words. "I don't know if I'm ready for something like this, Ellie. I'm tired. I've spent so many years just trying to survive. But maybe this is something I can do. Maybe this is what I've been waiting for." Elon felt a surge of hope. "You don't have to do it alone, Marabel. I'll be here every step of the way. We'll build this together." There was a long pause, and then Marabel spoke again, her voice filled with conviction. "Okay, Ellie, I'll do it. I'll help you build it. But it won't be easy, and it won't be just about you and me. It will be about everyone who needs us." "Exactly," Elon said, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "And we'll make sure they know that." Elon felt a surge of relief and excitement wash over him as Marabel agreed to help with the Guardian Angels project. It was more than just a business venture. It was a way to honor everything she had done for him and to ensure that others like her, who had dedicated their lives to caring for others, would have a place where their wisdom was valued. The next few weeks flew by as the plans for the project moved forward. Elon was busier than ever, overseeing the redesign of the property in Menlo Park and ensuring that every detail aligned with his vision. The property was being transformed into a vibrant community, one that would provide both comfort and purpose for its residents. Private apartments, communal gardens, spaces for socializing, and educational programs would all be part of the plan. It wasn't just a home for the elderly. It was a place for them to thrive, to continue sharing their knowledge, and to make a lasting impact on future generations. Elon had never been more determined. He had spent his life focusing on solving technological problems, building rockets, and creating electric cars. But now he realized that the most meaningful impact he could make was in the lives of people. Marabel had taught him that. She had shown him the power of nurturing a mind, of encouraging someone to believe in themselves, of giving them the tools to make their dreams a reality. It was time to pay that forward. As the project took shape, Elon started to involve Marabel more and more in the planning process. He asked for her input on everything, from the design of the communal spaces to the curriculum for the educational programs. He wanted her to feel like she was shaping the future of the project, not just implementing his ideas. Her voice and experience were invaluable, and he was determined to make sure that the Guardian Angels project reflected everything she stood for. One afternoon, after a long day of meetings, Elon sat down with Marabel to discuss the next steps. They were sitting in a small, quiet cafe near the construction site of the Guardian Angels village, and Elon could see how much the project had energized her. There was a spark in her eyes again, a glimmer of purpose that he hadn't seen in years. "I think we're really onto something here," Marabel said, her voice filled with a quiet excitement. "The community we're building, it's going to be more than just a place for people to live. It's going to be a place where they can contribute, share their wisdom, and feel valued. You're creating a legacy, Ellie, and it's not just for you. It's for everyone who's ever felt like they were overlooked." Elon smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you, Marabel. This is your vision as much as it is mine. You've shaped everything about how I see the world, and now you're shaping the future for so many others." She looked at him thoughtfully, her brow furrowing slightly. "But Ellie, you still haven't told me everything, have you? About your father, about why you feel so lost." Elon's heart skipped a beat. He had tried to bury his thoughts about his father, but it was impossible to ignore the void left by the revelation of his true paternity. He had spent so much of his life seeking approval from Errol, trying to prove himself worthy of a man who had never truly accepted him. And now, with the truth out in the open, Elon was left to grapple with the reality of who he was and what his relationship with his parents had been built on. "I don't know what to make of it," Elon admitted, his voice quieter than usual. "I've always believed that Errol was my father, and now everything's changed. I don't know what to feel. I've spent my whole life trying to understand him, to connect with him, but now I know he was never really my father. Joshua Haldeman, that's who I am, and I don't even know what to do with that." Marabel reached across the table and placed her hand gently on his. "You don't need to figure it all out right now. You're building something that matters. You're doing something that will change the world, and you've always had that in you. Whether you had Errol's blood or Joshua's doesn't change who you are. You've always been driven by something bigger than yourself." Elon took a deep breath, absorbing her words. She was right, of course. It didn't matter who his biological father was. What mattered was how he chose to live his life now, how he chose to shape the future. The Guardian Angels project was a chance to make a real difference, to leave a legacy that wasn't defined by his family's secrets, but by the values he had learned from the people who truly mattered to him. "I don't know if I'll ever fully understand my relationship with Errol, or why things were the way they were," Elon said, his voice steady. "But I do know this. I'm not going to let it define me, and I'm not going to let it stop me from doing what I believe in." Marabel smiled warmly, her eyes twinkling. "That's all anyone can do, Ellie. Make the choices that are right for you, and don't look back." Over the next few weeks, the Guardian Angels project moved closer to completion. Elon's vision was starting to come to life, and with Marabel at the helm, it was clear that the project was going to be something truly special. The first group of residents was already on their way, and there was an undeniable sense of excitement building within the community. This wasn't just a retirement home, it was a place for people to live with purpose, to continue sharing their knowledge, and to feel like they mattered. Elon had never been more certain of anything in his life. This project wasn't just about offering help to the elderly. It was about showing them that they had worth, that their experiences were valuable, and that they still had the power to change lives. On the day the Guardian Angels Village officially opened, Elon stood at the front of the newly renovated building, his heart full as he looked around at the bright faces of the residents. Marabel was by his side, a proud smile on her face as she welcomed the new community members. It was a moment of triumph, not just for Elon, but for everyone who had made this possible. As he walked through the halls, greeting the residents and hearing their stories, Elon felt a sense of fulfillment that he hadn't experienced before. This was the legacy he had been searching for, a legacy built not on rockets or cars, but on the people who had helped shape him into who he was. Marabel had taught him that life wasn't just about achievement, it was about connection, about making a difference in the lives of others. And in that moment, surrounded by the people who had dedicated their lives to caring for others, Elon understood what she had meant all along. This was just the beginning. The grand opening of Guardian Angels Village marked a turning point not only for Elon, but for everyone who had been involved in the project. The sense of purpose that had grown from its inception had become something tangible. A living, breathing community of people who had spent their lives giving to others, now being given a chance to receive in return. As Elon walked through the village, he was struck by the way it had come to life. The residents, elderly men and women who had spent their careers as nannies, housekeepers, and caregivers, were now in a place where they could share their knowledge with others, mentor younger generations, and make a real impact. The spaces were bright, welcoming, and accessible, designed with care to ensure that the residents not only lived comfortably, but could continue to be productive, to create, to teach. Elon stood in the courtyard, his hands tucked into the pockets of his jacket, watching the community interact. Some residents were gardening, others were seated on benches, discussing the afternoon's events. The sounds of laughter and conversation filled the air, and Elon felt a warmth spread through him. This was exactly what he had hoped for when he first conceived of the idea for Guardian Angels. Something more than just a place to live, but a place to thrive. Marabel had been a guiding force throughout it all. As the founding director, she had poured her heart and soul into every detail, from the layout of the gardens to the curriculum for the educational programs. She had become not just the head of the project, but the heart of it. Her wisdom, her patience, her way of listening and guiding, these were the qualities that had shaped the project into something extraordinary. But there was still something left unsaid. Despite everything that had happened, despite the success of the Guardian Angels project, the newfound sense of purpose, and the undeniable bond that had formed between Elon and Marabel, there were still pieces of the past that remained unresolved. One evening, as the sun began to set over the village, Elon found himself sitting alone with Marabel on a bench in the courtyard. The air was cool, and the sounds of the evening settled into a peaceful hush. The sky above was tinged with shades of purple and orange, and Elon watched the horizon in silence for a long moment. "You've done something incredible here, Ellie," Marabel said, breaking the silence. "Something that's going to change the way we think about the elderly, about caregiving, and about giving people a chance to continue living with purpose." Elon smiled, but there was a hint of sadness in his eyes. "I couldn't have done it without you. You've been the one to bring it all together. But there's something I still need to understand, Marabel. Something that's been weighing on me." Marabel looked at him curiously. "What is it, Ellie?" Elon hesitated, searching for the right words. "It's about my father. I've come to terms with the fact that Errol wasn't my real father, that my biological father was Joshua Haldeman. But I still don't understand everything about what happened with him. What was he like? Why didn't I ever know him?" Marabel's expression softened. "You've been carrying this burden for a long time, haven't you?" she said gently. "I know it's hard to make sense of it all, especially now. But the truth is, Joshua was a brilliant man. He was adventurous, creative, and had big dreams. He had a vision for the world, and he was always striving to make it a better place. But his dreams were bigger than his reality. And sometimes when you reach for something too big, you lose sight of what really matters. Elon nodded slowly, absorbing her words. He had heard bits and pieces of the story, stories from his mother, from the investigator, but he had never truly understood Joshua Haldeman's place in his life. He had spent his entire existence trying to prove himself to a man who wasn't really his father, and now he was trying to come to terms with who he truly was. "Why didn't you tell me the whole story?" Elon asked, looking directly at Marabel. "Why didn't you tell me about Joshua sooner?" Marabel took a deep breath and turned her gaze to the horizon. "Because, Ellie, sometimes the truth is harder than the lies. Sometimes knowing the truth doesn't make it easier to carry. It makes it heavier. When you were a child, I promised your mother that I would protect you, and that meant keeping certain things from you. The world you were growing up in, your father, your mother, your place in that world, was complicated, and I didn't think you needed to know about Joshua. You had enough to carry on your own." Elon felt a pang of regret. "But I could have handled it. I needed to know, Marabel. It would have changed everything for me. It would have helped me understand why things were the way they were with Errol, why he treated me the way he did." Marabel looked at him with understanding in her eyes. "I know you think that now, Ellie, but at the time you were just a boy. You couldn't have understood what it meant to have two fathers, one who wasn't really your father, and one who was your father but didn't see you as his son. It was too much for anyone to process back then." Elon nodded, but a sense of peace began to wash over him. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like he was missing something. The pieces of his past were finally starting to fall into place. Joshua, Errol, Marabel, these were the people who had shaped him, who had guided him to become the man he was today. The truth, as painful as it had been, had opened up a new understanding of who he was and why he had always felt the need to build something bigger than himself. He turned to Marabel, a deep sense of gratitude in his heart. "I don't think I could have done this without you," he said softly. "You've been the one constant in my life. Through everything, my successes, my failures, the mistakes I've made, you've always believed in me. And now we've built something that can help so many people. People like you. People who've given so much and never asked for anything in return." Marabel smiled, a tear glistening in her eye. "You've always had the power to change the world, Ellie. All I did was help you see that." They sat in silence for a while longer, the sounds of the village around them growing fainter as the night fell. Elon realized that this wasn't just about the Guardian Angels project. It wasn't just about the success he had achieved or the wealth he had accumulated. It was about the people who had helped him along the way, the people who had shaped him into who he was, and the knowledge that no matter where his life had taken him, he had never been alone. And in that moment, Elon Musk knew that he had finally found the answer to the question that had haunted him for so long: what really mattered. It wasn't rockets or electric cars or even the billions he had earned. It was the connections he had made, the lives he had touched, and the people who had always been there for him, even when he didn't understand their importance. Marabel had taught him that sometimes the greatest legacy isn't the one we build for ourselves. It's the one we leave behind for others. As time passed, the Guardian Angels project flourished, growing into a beacon of hope and opportunity for those who had spent their lives serving others. The residents, now living in a community designed to honor their wisdom and contributions, thrived in ways that Elon hadn't imagined possible. What had once been a vision had become a reality, one that changed not only the lives of the elderly caregivers, but also the lives of those they mentored and taught. But beyond the success of the project itself, there was something more profound happening, a deeper transformation within Elon. With each passing day, as he watched Marabel interact with the residents, offering guidance and support, he felt the weight of his past start to lift. The pain, the confusion, and the anger that had once defined his relationship with his parents began to fade into the background, replaced by a new understanding of who he was and where he came from. He had always been driven by the need to prove something, to show the world that he was capable of greatness. But now he understood that true greatness came from a place of compassion, from helping others and lifting them up, not from a desire to prove oneself. Marabel had taught him that lesson, though it had taken him years to fully grasp it. One evening, after a long day of meetings and planning, Elon found himself sitting in the garden at the Guardian Angels village, his eyes following the movement of the residents as they went about their evening routines. The setting sun painted the sky in hues of gold and pink, and the sound of soft chatter and laughter filled the air. It was a peaceful, serene moment, and for the first time in a long time, Elon felt at peace with himself. Marabel joined him on the bench, her steps slow but steady. She had become more than just a mentor to him. She had become family. The bond between them had deepened over the months, and with it, a sense of belonging that Elon had never experienced before. In a way, it was as if the years of estrangement, the silence, the misunderstandings, all of it had melted away in the presence of the people who mattered most. "I think we've done something good here, Ellie," Marabel said softly, sitting beside him. Elon smiled, glancing at her. "I think so too. This place, it's not just about providing for people, it's about honoring them, giving them a chance to live with dignity and purpose." "That's always been your vision," Marabel replied, "to help people see their worth, and I'm proud to have been part of it." Elon looked at her, his expression serious. "You've been more than just part of it, Marabel. You've been the heart of it. None of this would have been possible without you." Marabel reached over and patted his hand gently. "You've always had the heart for this kind of work, Ellie. I just helped you find it." He nodded, his throat tightening with emotion. "I never fully understood what you meant by that. You know, you always said I had a special mind, that I was different. I never knew how much those words would shape me, how much they would drive me to do what I've done. But now I see it. You helped me understand that my differences, my ability to think differently, to see the world in a unique way, weren't a curse. They were a gift. And you nurtured that gift in ways I'll never fully be able to thank you for." Marabel's eyes softened, her voice quiet. "You don't need to thank me, Ellie. You've already given me more than I ever expected. You've built something that will continue to help people long after we're gone. That's the legacy of love." Elon sat back, contemplating her words. The Guardian Angels project was just one part of his legacy, but it felt like the most important. He had built companies, created technologies that would change the world, and amassed great wealth. But none of that compared to the impact he had made on the lives of the residents at Guardian Angels, on the lives of people who had spent their entire lives giving to others, never asking for anything in return. Now, they had a place where they could be appreciated, where their stories and experiences could be shared with others, and where they could still contribute in meaningful ways. And for Elon, there was nothing more fulfilling than that. As the evening wore on, the two of them sat together in silence, the weight of everything they had accomplished settling in the air between them. Elon had learned many lessons in his life, but the most important one had come from Marabel. It was about love, unconditional love, the love that had driven her to care for him when he was a child, the love that had sustained her through years of hardship, and the love that now filled the spaces of the Guardian Angels village. It was the kind of love that asked for nothing in return, the kind of love that simply wanted to see others succeed and thrive. "You've built something beautiful, Ellie," Marabel said, her voice tinged with pride. "And I'm proud of you. I'm proud of everything you've done." Elon looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. "I'm proud of you too, Marabel. You've shown me that greatness isn't about what we achieve for ourselves. It's about what we give to others." The sun had long since set, and the stars were beginning to twinkle in the sky above them. Elon stood, offering Marabel his hand. "Let's go inside," he said. "There's a lot more work to do tomorrow." Marabel smiled as she took his hand, rising slowly from the bench. "I'm not as young as I used to be, Ellie," she joked softly, her voice full of warmth. "But I'll follow you wherever you go." Elon smiled back, his heart full. "Together, we'll make sure the work never stops." As they walked into the village, Elon knew that he had found something greater than success. He had found purpose, and he had found family. The journey that had begun with a simple act of kindness from Marabel, a woman who had taken him in when he was young, who had believed in him when no one else did, had come full circle. The legacy he was building wasn't just about rockets and cars. It was about love, compassion, and making sure that those who had given so much to the world received something in return. And for Elon, that was the greatest achievement of all.